Hey guys, what's going on? IkeGuitar here. Hope you're doing well. Another video out today. Today we're talking about buying a Stratocaster. And I think a lot of us, when we're buying guitars, we get all up in the nitty gritty. We want to buy the latest, the greatest, but really what's tried and true, it's going to work for nearly everyone. I kind of want to break down for you guys how to go about buying the classic Fender Stratocaster. Now when it comes to buying Stratocasters, manufacturers typically will design their Strats format based off of a already established, well-known decade of Strats. And typically you either going to have an early 60s Stratocaster or a late 60s Stratocaster. There are slight variations between the two. I won't go into all the details. You may even find some late 50s style Strats, but most modern guitars today are going to be in that 62 to 64 camp of Stratocaster. Now we've seen early 60s Strats before. Typically they have this three-tone sunburst. In a way you can see the black, the red, and the brown kind of peeping through on my Bluesman Vintage here. Also going to have 3 single coils, a pick guard, a 5-way selector, and of course the tone and volume pots. Now one thing to be aware of when buying a Stratocaster is that the one differentiator between any Strat is going to be its neck radius and its neck shape. And there are all kinds of neck radii out there, but let me quickly explain what neck radius is. Alright, so as far as neck radius and what that actually means, a neck radius is essentially the curvature of the neck fretboard. Okay, not the actual neck itself, that's actual neck shape. We're talking about fretboard radius, we just mean the curvature of that rosewood slab or that rosewood fretboard or maple fretboard on the guitar. So with my Bluesman Vintage here, it'd be tough to tell. You kind of have to look at the guitar kind of like this and kind of look down the side or take some kind of measuring tool to see how the fretboard curves and whatnot. But typically for most 60s guitars, they had a 7 1/4 fretboard radius. So what that means is that it's very curved, right? Not super flat. It can get a little small in the hands depending upon how big the actual neck is, right? But typically 7 1/4 is like the bottom of the neck radii, and then it can go all the way up to 16 inches or like perfectly flat for most nylon string guitars. So as far as where Fenders come into play, typically you're going to either be 7 1/4, you're going to be 9 to 10 inches, or if you're really fancy like me, you'll be 12-inch radii. Now I have bigger hands, so if the 7 1/4 inch radius is a pretty curved fretboard, my hands kind of like don't bend as well because my hands are super meaty and chunky, so I get bigger fretboard radius on my guitar. This Bluesman Vintage is a 10-inch radius. It's a lot flatter than you'd expect on an early 60s Stratocaster, but I also have fretboards at 12-inch radiuses, which I really do enjoy. They allow me to space out the strings a little bit more, a little bigger of a fretboard sometimes, and it just feels really good in the hands. But for most of us, 7 1/4 is going to be okay, but I would recommend 9 or 10. So when it comes to actual necks and guitars, radius is just one part of the equation. You also have the neck shape. Neck shape's a little different. Neck shape's going to differentiate as far as like the back of the guitar neck is concerned and how big it feels in your hand. That will couple with the fretboard radius for sure, but as far as like where it sits in the meat part of your hand, that's going to be the biggest factor. And there are all kinds of things like soft V and oval C shapes and like medium V's and whatnot, but typically for most guitars, most people enjoy like a modern C-shaped neck that typically tends to taper up toward the front of the guitar, right? So as you're playing, it's a little bit bigger down in the first fret ranges, and as you climb up the neck, you're going to actually find that the guitar is going to get easier to wrap your hand around. That's the modern C shape, and most Fender guitars have a modern C. They may even have like a modern D or like a V shape or something like that. Go to your guitar store and try out the necks for yourself and see which one you like the most. And that was the difference between me liking and disliking the PRS Silver Sky. I made a video about that. It was 7 1/4 inch radius, which I can get by on, but the fact that it had that soft V kind of jutted out in your hand, like the 60 Stratocaster had like a really soft V-shaped neck, I wasn't a big fan for myself. So be aware of what neck you're getting, how it couples with the radius, and make sure that it fits nice in your hand. So as far as the standard Strats are concerned, you're not going to go wrong with the rosewood fretboard. Those are going to be the most modern Stratocasters to date here. They've been putting rosewood on Stratocasters for a while now, but I feel like a lot of people, unless you really like maple necks, I would just go with the rosewood on maple. It's a great, just standard sound. You can't mistake the sound of a rosewood neck. And although tone woods aren't going to be like the biggest contributing factor to the sound of your instrument, the feel of the rosewood might be the thing that sets the guitar apart. Rosewood does feel better on the hands, typically because rosewood is unfinished, whereas if you had a maple neck, those are going to be finished necks. It's going to feel like that plastic. It won't feel like actual wood grain running underneath your fingers. That can turn you off from playing. So be aware of that. I would recommend rosewood on maple for all you Stratocaster starters out there. Now, if you're buying a Strat for the first time, I'd of course recommend going with a single coil configuration. 3 singles on the guitar. There are different kinds of Stratocaster out there for pickup configurations. There are like HSS Stratocasters, which have 2 singles and a humbucker in the bridge position. To me, if you're going to buy a Strat for the first time, always go with your single coils first, and then if you feel like you want a Strat style guitar with a humbucker installed, you can go that route later, okay? I will say, just as far as trade-in value is concerned, there's always a chance that this first guitar you get may not be the one you keep forever. So I want to keep in the back of my mind here what's going to have more value over time, and I do find that most HSS Stratocasters typically don't sell or resell as well on the used marketplace. People love traditional Strat sounds. If you're going to buy a Strat for the first time, I'd recommend getting a Stratocaster with 3 single coils. Now, as far as color is concerned, of course I'm going to like a Strat with a more traditional sunburst, but you cannot beat a black Strat. You can't beat a Fiesta red Strat, even Dakota red, Sherwood green, seafoam, whatever you feel like you want in a color, I'd recommend getting it. Whatever's going to give you longevity with the guitar and make you feel like you could play this thing and inspire you, get the color you want. As far as whether you go with a polyurethane or a nitro cellulose lacquer, that's going to be a point of contention for a lot of us here. A lot of us feel like we want the nitro because nitro typically tends to be a bit more of a breathable finish than poly. They've been using nitro longer. Now, poly is different because poly is a little bit more constrictive, a little bit more of a glossy, glassy finish. I do say, though, that poly does offer a lot of great abilities in the fact you can take it on the road and the guitar is not going to get beat up super easily. That thing can withstand the temperatures, can withstand the cold a whole lot better than a nitro guitar can. But nitro does feel better on the hands, okay? Nitro does offer a more premium style of man, I have a nitro guitar. I have spent many dollars on this guitar. So if you want that kind of factor, yes, nitro's cool, but don't just ditch a poly guitar because you think nitro is better. They're both different and they're both good for their own reasons. The only reason why I would buy a poly guitar is if I had a satin neck. Satin necks are really important to me. I like to be able to slide on the neck really quickly. Typically glossed over poly necks stick to my hand and get grubby, and I'm not a big fan of that. So I typically go to more either unfinished neck, satin necks, or more of a nitro neck. So be aware of that when you're buying your finish. Also be aware that nitro is going to be a lot more expensive for the instrument. You may get better tones out of it, but the results are so minimal it's almost not even bothering with it. So those are the things that I would begin to look at when going to buy a Stratocaster. I'm going to be making another video about what mods you should do to a Stratocaster once you've gotten a feel for your guitar, but for now those things should suit you well. Don't just buy into the hype of a Signature Series Stratocaster or some new fandangled thing on the market. Stratocasters are tried and true. They all sound almost the same. Go find one near you and try it out. They're a whole lot of fun. Guys, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing. I make videos all the time. If you like this kind of content, let me know down below if you have a cool Stratocaster you love and what you would recommend anyone buying a Strat for the first time should do before he or she buys one. Guys, great to see you. Have a good day, and we'll see you next time on IkeGuitar.